Planning Board meeting for October 1st. If everyone would stand and salute the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Present.
Here.
Here.
Okay, I just want to announce that we are changing the order of the agenda because we want to make sure that we have as much time as possible for Foxborough since we have a lot of people here. And the other things on the agenda are much shorter and sort of more clear-cut. So we're going to do, well, first we're going to do the council referral, the extension of time, and then we'll do Lisa Real and Raritan Bay, and then the majority of the meeting will be the RG management. So, the council referral?
Yes, good evening. Since last year, I have been reviewing the land development ordinance and trying to resolve inconsistencies because often the zoning officer and I'm challenged with questions related to the permitted uses in the section. And I have said this before that originally we followed the North American industrial standards, which were hyper-specific. Since we want to be a more business-friendly community, we started evaluating and looking at the LDO. And the first thing I came and presented in front of the planning board and the council was the economic development opportunity zone ordinance. And what we did in that is we created new uses that were more flexible. For example, retail, sale, and services. Originally, you could have a kenneling place, but you couldn't have dog grooming because it was very specific. You could sell cookies, but you couldn't sell an ice cream. To me, whether you sell cookies or ice cream, it's still retail sales. So we crafted new definitions and we revamped actually the EDO zone. After I was done with that, obviously there were other zones that include non-residential uses, and it was time to evaluate those zones. I looked at CN zone to begin with, and when I started going through the property data, looking at the lot widths, looking at bulk standards, I noticed that the CN zone is exactly identical to the EDO1 zone. And what I mean by that is the bulk requirements for the CN zone are exactly the same. The purpose for both these zones is same. What these zones do is to provide for small-scale retail uses that cater directly to the residents of the immediate neighborhood. So after having seen that, the only two differences I saw was that in the new EDO1 zone, we had requirements for front yard setback, like we had minimum front yard setback and maximum front yard setback. And one of the reasons we did that is we don't want to see a huge parking lot in front of a strip mall. We want the buildings closer, but yet have some landscape buffer between the right-of-way and the building, but at the same time screen these parking spaces, pushed them to the back. With the CN zone, I noticed that the front yard required is 50 feet, which is actually the maximum front yard which is required for the EDO1. So it's really not inconsistent. All it will do is for the CN zone have a minimum front yard requirement as well. I noticed that properties in CN zone as is are quite closer to the street right of way in many sections. Both these zones are located almost along the same route routes. So you'll see CN zone next to EDO1 zone on English Town Road. You'll see CN zone around Route 35. So it just made sense to merge or consolidate these two zones. What I propose to the council is, again, amendment to the EDO1 zone to include the CN zone, and we have a list of properties that come within the CN zone listed with the ordinance. One thing in the last 6 months after we adopted EDO1 zone, we realized that in the EDO1 zone as well as EDO3 zone, we allow health and fitness centers. But there were few requests we got, like the zoning officer and myself, where a property owner from the EDO1 zone would ask me, can I put a health and fitness center, which is like a gym? But these gyms, the size of a gym varies significantly. So there could be a 1,500 square feet health and fitness center, but there could be a 45,000 square feet fitness center. We don't want to allow bigger fitness centers in the EDO1 zone, and the reason being is EDO1 zone is restricted, like the minimum lot area requirement is 1 acre. So on a 1 acre parcel, you don't want to have a huge gym. So we just added a requirement that says that any health and fitness center that is less than 10,000 square feet shall be permitted in EDO1 zone. Anything that is beyond that should be in the EDO3 zone. It is pretty consistent with what we did with educational use as well. So that was the only change. We included all the properties listed in CN zone under this new ordinance. The zoning map will be revised to show that CN zone has become EDO1 zone. But that's pretty much what we did with this ordinance.
Okay.
And in fact, it is, just let me add, it is consistent with the master plan. We amended our master plan re-examination report in June, and we had included language which says that we should re-evaluate commercial zones in the township and consider consolidation, especially where the bulk standards and the zoning requirements are the same. So this proposed ordinance is consistent with the master plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or comments from the board? Is there anyone from the public that wants to speak on this ordinance? Okay, seeing no hands, I'll close the public portion. Okay, so we just need, oh, did you want to review it?
So in your packet, you also had a resolution. As you know, in these instances where we referred an ordinance from council, the board is charged with determining whether or not the ordinance is consistent with the master plan. Obviously, we can give other comments as well, but our main task is to determine if it's consistent. And as Vina just said, the master plan was indeed amended to request that this happen. So it is consistent, and there is a resolution in your packet that, if you're prepared, we should have a motion and vote on as well.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Makes sense to me, yes.
It's good, yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we have the minutes for September 10th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Mr. Marucci, second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Schmidt. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, and the minutes for September 24th, 2019.
I'll move it.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Marucci.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Luca. Roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, extension of time for Bharat Thakar.
Yes, Madam Chair, that application is ready. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Walter Toto on behalf of the applicant, Bharat Thacker. Got it, great, sorry. Good evening, members of the board, Madam Chair. Walter Toto on behalf of Bharat Thacker. I'm here to request an extension, a one-year extension of a final site plan that was granted by this board unanimously and memorialized on August 1st, 2017. We've just about complied with resolution compliance with the exception of obtaining, I think it's paragraph 6 of the resolution that was adopted. We have not yet obtained our approval from the MUA. I believe we're on their November agenda. The reason for the delay, there was a bit of a disconnect between the architect and the project engineer. That's been resolved. There's also a second group that's reviewing the sewer plan, and it's a private group. It's actually known as the Sewer Group. It's a 3,000 linear foot private line. Their engineer from Creston Engineering is also reviewing our sewer plan. They've already reviewed it. They've had a letter. The changes that are requested are de minimis. I expect that to be resolved within the next 15 to 30 days. So final resolution compliance, I think, is imminent. We're also seeking this board's approval so we can wrap up our construction financing. And just so the board knows this, again, the board approved it unanimously. It's a 7,200 square foot office building on Route 9. I think it's 3649 Route 9. So we're hoping to wrap this up with the board's help. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Did you have anything?
The municipal land use law does permit the board to grant up to 3 one-year extensions. So they're asking for 1-year extension. And it's basically, if they came back to the board and it was approved unanimously, it would get approved again. But if we don't extend it, technically it could expire, or they could have trouble getting their financing and moving ahead.
Correct.
So the reasoning for it is exactly this. When you have difficulty finishing your punch list items off of our conditions, and it looks like they've been working diligently on getting there, they need a little extra time to get finished, and it doesn't make sense to make them come back with a whole other application to do the same exact thing. So this is where an extension makes sense. This is what it was created for. So there is a resolution also for this in your packet to approve the 1-year extension. The extension goes from October 1, the date of the resolution, so August 1.
Thank you.
So it'll go around again until
Thank you,
next
Ms. Terry.
August 1.
I appreciate that.
Okay, any questions? Did we do the public?
That is new public.
All right, can I have a motion to grant the extension? Moved by Mr. Schmidt. Roll call, seconded by Mr. Marucci. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you for your time this
Okay.
evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, we have resolutions 11-19P, Sedano Office Plaza LLC, minor subdivision with C variance. Do I have a motion? Okay, moved by Mr. Lenning.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Marucci. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Madam Chairperson,
Yes,
for the record, I'm present.
you're here, okay. 14-19P, OBMUA, the Water Tower, major preliminary and final site plan and subdivision with C variances. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
By Mr. Schmidt. Seconded by Mr. Lenning. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we don't have to.
We did that. We were done.
Okay, I just want to remind everybody that we're on television, and the TV will be on until 10 o'clock. That doesn't mean necessarily that the meeting will be over by then, but, okay. And, all right, as I said, we're changing the order to give more time to RD management. So Lisa Real, 04-19P, Block 13, Lot 43, minor subdivision with C variances.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Todd Cohen. I'm the attorney for the applicant, Lisa Reale. The applicant is proposing a minor subdivision to Block 13 and Lot 43 on Sunset Avenue in the Lawrence Harbor section of the township. The request is to create 2 lots. Presently, there's existing an older vacant residential structure, which is basically a tear-down, and a shared garage. There are existing violations of the front yard setback, side yard setback, and side and rear yard for the accessory structure. The proposal calls for 2 lots, each which would contain a new residential dwelling, and would have certain variances connected therewith, which are outlined in your planner's letter of September 11th, We've also had the opportunity to review your engineer's letter of September 5th, and I believe you have reviewed the minor subdivision plat submitted by Richard Stockton and Associates, and I have with me this evening our professional planner, Christine Caffone, who will address the requested variances this evening.
Okay, did you want to put her on there?
I would like to, and have her sworn at this time.
Swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
It's Christine Nazaro, Nazzaro. Caffone, C-O, F as in Frank, O-N-E. Business address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701.
Christine, would you be kind enough to put your credentials, both professional and educational, on the record for the board?
Yes, good evening. I'm a licensed professional planner. I've been testifying before boards for about 23 years. I've been qualified as an expert witness here in Old Bridge and before over 400 boards throughout the state of New Jersey. In addition to that, I'm an affordable housing special master.
Okay, well accepted.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christine, you're familiar with the application submitted by the applicant and the plan submitted by Mr. Stockton's office, is that correct?
Yes, I am. I reviewed the application submission documents, including Mr. Stockton's plan, which was dated 11/12/18, and most currently revised the plan I saw to 7/17/2019.
And you're also familiar with the planner's review letter of September 11th and the engineer's of September 5th, is that correct?
Yes, I have seen both of those review letters.
And would you please address the variances requested by the applicant this evening?
In addition to that, I have visited the subject's property to become familiar with the site and the surrounding area. This is a very straightforward application that's before the board tonight. It's really just a minor subdivision to take an existing 7,500-foot lot in your R5 zone that's located at 43 Sunset, subdivide that property into 2 lots of equal size and demolish the existing structure that's on and construct 2 new dwellings. The variance relief that required in order to accomplish this is that we need a lot area because the R5 zone requires us to have 5,000 square feet in area. We're proposing 2 equal lots of 3,750 feet. Likewise, we need frontage variances and width variances to have lots of 37.5 feet where the R5 zone requires 50. So as you can see, the existing property is substantially oversized for what is in the immediate area and what the zone requires. In addition to those dimensional variances that we require for the creation of this subdivision, we do require a minimum side yard setback. In the R5 zone, you are required to have a minimum side yard setback of 9 feet and a combined side yard of 15. What we are proposing, while we meet the combined of 15, where we are deficient is on the east side of both of the proposed lots. We are proposing a side yard setback of 6.2 feet, which does not meet your side yard minimum of 9. And we're proposing on the west side 9.3. So you can see that we more than meet the 15 combined. It's just on the eastern side of both proposed lots, we are at only 6.2, where 9 is required by ordinance. And we also need variance relief for the detached garage to retain that structure. It is to remain. That's an existing nonconformity on the property today. It maintains a 2-foot side yard setback, so that's also nonconforming. We comply with the requirements in your ordinance for a minor subdivision, as is pointed out in Mrs. Sawant's 9/11 review letter. So what we are left with is to provide the statutory proof for the granting of these bulk variances. And I would recommend to the board that these variances can be granted not under the C1 hardship criteria, but under the C2 flexible C criteria, where this proposed subdivision represents a better zoning alternative for this area. As you can see on the key map that was provided in conjunction with Mr. Stockton's plans, and I had an opportunity to review the tax maps for this area, as well as the Google Earth aerial to look at the size of lots. And I can tell the board that there are 8 lots within 200 feet of this property that are at 25 feet or less of frontage, and there are 4 lots that are 37 feet of frontage. So you've got 12 lots in this immediate area that are certainly consistent with the proposed 37.5 lot size frontage, which is why I would imagine your planner comes to the conclusion in her review letter, and I'll read just a few lines. It appears that there are existing homes on the same side of the street with side yard setbacks that are consistent with the proposed side yard setback. The properties immediately to the south of the subject property have lot widths that are compatible to the proposed lots. This is also the case of many of the homes in the Lawrence Harbor section of the township. So I think certainly the board can be persuaded by that statement in your planner's review letter, as well as my findings as a professional planner. My review of the lots in the area is that this subdivision as proposed is exactly consistent with the established character of this area, which in my opinion allows the board to rely on criteria E of the land use law, which talks about the establishment of appropriate population densities, but also criteria M, which talks about an efficient use of the land, because I do think having a lot pattern and home sizes and home lots, the size of lots that are consistent with the area lends itself to criteria M. So that leaves us with a burden of proof with respect to the negative criteria and the detriment or substantial detriment. If you had an opportunity to go out there, you can see that this looks sort of like just an open patch of land in this neighborhood that's undeveloped, and I think that the unsubdivided property would probably result in a home that was out of character with the area because it would not be consistent with the other size of homes in the area. So I do think that the subdivision as proposed certainly fits in with the public good and that it will lend itself to the development of this property, the elimination of the existing home, which is in a serious state of disrepair, and the construction of 2 new homes that are certainly consistent with the character of the area with no substantial detriment to the R5 zone plan, because I think that the character of this area is exactly as your planner characterizes it in her 9/11 review of this application. So taken together, I think we meet our statutory proof under the C2 section of the statute, satisfying both the positive and the negative criteria for the grant of the proposed subdivision and all of the bulk variances resulting therefrom.
Thank you, Christine. Any questions for Christine?
Our planner, do you have anything?
Yes. So I agree with Ms. Caffone's testimony, and I have said this in front of the planning board as well as the zoning board in the past, that our R5 zone, the zoning ordinance is a bit challenged in the sense that the zoning standards are really not compatible with the existing development patterns. What I mean by that is most of the lots, residential lots in the R5 zone in the Lawrence Parkway section are much smaller than 5,000 square feet, and you often see that homeowners come in to the zoning board or the planning board seeking for variances on these lots. And I believe that when we did the master plan amendment to the master plan re-examination, there was a recommendation that we re-evaluate residential zones against their zoning standards and make them more consistent. So once I'm done with the non-residential zones, that will be my next step.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our engineer? do you-
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our report is dated September 5th. We did have a couple of just minor things which I think can be summed up just as, does the applicant agree to comply with our
Yes, we've had the
request?
opportunity to discuss with the applicant. Your comments 1 through 14 were probably filed by deed.
Okay.
And then the rest of your comments are agreeable, and the applicant will comply either on resubmission of the plan or at time of plot plan.
Great. So, and just for the board's benefit, most of our comments dealt with the grading and impact to the adjoining properties. When you have infill development like this, the concern from an engineering perspective is just the impact to the adjoining property owners. Our ordinance is pretty specific about how drainage is handled for minor projects. This is a minor project because it disturbs less than 1 acre of area and proposes less than a 1/4 acre of impervious coverage. So it doesn't need to meet the DEP requirements for stormwater, but we have specific requirements which the applicant, I think, can meet at time of plot plan. So should the board act favorably, that would be a condition of approval that they submit an engineered grading plan for each lot at the time of building permit, addressing the stormwater requirements as well.
Okay, thank you. The board, any comments?
Yes.
Mr. Merwin, do you?
I'm just wondering, when do we say no? When do we say no? Of course, the lots are, smaller. They have little bungalows on it. But this house has probably been sitting there for 50, 60 years on that same lot. The guy dies, somebody bought it, and they're looking to make a buck. When do we say enough is enough? When do we say, we don't want more housing? Right? This house has been sitting there perfectly okay for all those years. Now somebody wants to make some money, and they want to subdivide the property and put two-story houses on it. When do we, as the community, say enough is enough?
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Mr. Luca? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could provide testimony. I was curious about the shared garage. Is that something that's deeded into the existing dwelling and the property behind? Or I'm just curious why it's staying and what.
It's my understanding that it's used by the property to the rear, so we couldn't take it down without affecting their property rights, and obviously, as a neighbor, we're not looking to take
Who
away.
actually owns it? It seems to be straddling the property line.
I would say the structure is owned by whatever's on each property is owned by that person.
Is it a continuous structure or?
I believe there's a wall in between, and one is used by one property and one is used by the other. Is that correct?
It sits on the rear property line.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, do you want to just read the?
Application for minor subdivision with C variances. As stated by the planner, they require variances for lot area, frontage and width, and then for the pre-existing variances for the existing garage that's going to stay.
Okay, do we have a motion?
We didn't open it to
Yeah, we
public.
forgot to open the public. Thank you.
What?
Open to the public for comments.
Oh. Does anyone from the public have any comments or questions regarding this application? Yes, do you want to come forward and give your name and address, please?
Hello, how are you? My name is Mark Daly. I'm at 46 Sunset Avenue in Lawrence Harbor. So I would be the next door neighbor to 43 Sunset. And my question or comment is, this is going to directly affect us by changing the variance on my side. So I wanted to know how close the other house is going to be to my house, because I already have a house on my other side that I can pretty much touch. You know, if our windows are open, you know, I can see directly into the other window, so we always have our windows closed on each side, and I'm afraid that's going to happen on my other side. So it does directly affect my wife and I, and the surrounding neighbors. So that was my concern. I don't know if I'm for or against it, but it's going to affect me.
Okay, well, we'll get to the answer.
Thank you.
I understand the question. On our closest side to the home that's existing on our lot 46, there's a 9.3-foot side yard setback. So that meets the minimum requirement for the zone. So even if we weren't proposing to subdivide this property, we could put a house in that location. So we certainly, the 9.3 is actually greater than the setback you have to the lot on the other side of you on lot 47. So you'll have more distance between you and the proposed dwelling that we have than you do between yourself and the dwelling that's on your west, lot 47. And that side, our property line with your home, meets the minimum requirement for the R5 zone.
Sir, how far is your house off your setback? Do you know? Have you had a survey done?
I have, but I don't know off the top of my head.
On our property line, it's probably less than a foot at some points, or maybe a foot or two. And on the other side, he's maybe 2 or 3 feet off the property line. So your home doesn't meet the side yard setback on either side, east or west. And I understand that that's an existing condition, and we certainly have a right to not impact your property.
Right.
But I don't know if you had an opportunity, can I show him, Chairwoman?
Yeah.
So this is our proposed,
This is your house here.
or Mr. Cohen can do it. which is 9.3 feet.
Variances on
To
this
the
side,
line or property to my house?
to the line.
When you're, Counsel, can you just repeat for the record what was discussed?
I'm sorry. I explained to the gentleman who owns, I believe, Lot 46, which, if you're looking at the map we provide, is to the left of our property. From Sunset, it's to the right. He had asked me how far his property was and to the common lot line, and then how far our side yard proposed setback was. That's the one that's conforming at 9.3, I believe. It is. That's what I told him. At least 10. It looks like a foot or two, but on his side.
Okay, did you
Thank
have
you.
any other questions?
That's it.
or
Nope, that's it.
comments?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Madam Chairperson,
Read everything, right? Okay, was there any other comments from the board regarding that?
Madam Chairperson,
Mr. Merwin? Mr. Merwin?
Mr. Merwin,
I make a motion to deny.
make a motion to what?
Deny the application.
Okay, is there a second to deny the application?
I'd second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Yes to deny.
Yes, to the line.
No. I need some clarification, though, related to engineers with the garage. The garage is a concern.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. McGuire.
The garage is a concern that's
Yeah.
straddling the two properties.
Yes.
How does that come into play?
My understanding from Ms. Cafone's testimony, or actually the applicant's counsel's representation, is that it's one building with a party wall. It's almost like a duplex. You know how you have duplexes with a property line that runs down a wall? It's a similar kind of situation where you have a shared garage where you have access from either side and there's a wall separating them. It's an existing condition that does require variance, but it's an existing non-conforming condition.
Demo the building without affecting the other owner.
That's my mic?
Yes, did you vote?
Oh, so she's talking to Dean, I think. So, yeah, essentially, you couldn't demolish this portion, I mean, without significant work to be done on the garage. It's hard to demolish just a portion. Again, I don't have the plans for the garage, but typical garages of this type, of this age, are such that there's structurally, you couldn't just demolish a portion of it and then leave the other half standing.
So the property owner behind them, have we heard from them? Are they in favor of this?
I imagine that they would have been noticed with the public notice as well.
I mean, they have been noticed. If you give me a second, I can consult with my client and find out if they've had any personal discussions with them, but.
If you have any testimony you want to put on.
Who's he talking to?
The client.
So what are they saying? They can't demolish the garage?
Without affecting the neighbor in the back, the neighbor in the back where it stays, so that they're having.
My understanding that my client, a contractor, believes that he could knock down or take apart just our side, and we could eliminate the variance on our side of the lot. So we would make that a condition. If the board saw it fit to grant their application, we would make that a condition of our approval. That would eliminate two variances.
Then I say yes.
Yes means that,
So you're saying,
It's, no,
are you voting in favor of denying the application?
no.
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 Yes.
No, and I also have a question for the planner. Is there currently on record an ordinance that dictates certain distances between two homes where windows would be? Is there a minimum distance between two homes in order to have a set of windows on a facing home?
That is covered by the minimum side yard setback that is required by the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
No. So what's the
So the first motion fails, so is there another motion? Would somebody then want to make a motion in favor of approving it? The motion to approve would be including the condition that the applicant has agreed to remove the garage to the back, the existing garage to the back of the property.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Marucci. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lauer.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
So it passes with the garage being removed.
Okay.
Much for your time this evening,
Thank you.
Thank you.
and thank you for accommodating us early.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 minutes, and we're going to the next application. Okay, application 24-19P, Raritan Bay Medical Center, preliminary and final site plan.
Chairman John Junko of Giordano, Helen Cecil appearing on behalf of the applicant. The applicant has recently sought approval before the board for an expansion of the emergency room and some amendments to the hospital campus.
You just talk into the microphone so everybody can hear you.
getting heard.
You can just sit.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, Hackensack Meridian Health has recently applied for and obtained approval to modify and amend the emergency room and upgrade the hospital area. And in conjunction with that, they also are rebranding throughout the network of hospitals with their new logos and name and so forth. And this application is seeking approval for the various signs that would be devoted for the site for, first of all, to identify the buildings and guide the patients to the proper area, and second, directional signs throughout the site, and then finally a banner sign that would from time to time display either some special events or new services or whatever would be a feature for the hospital. And in that regard, the application does seek several variances, and I have with me this evening Peter McCabe, our civil engineer, who is prepared to testify concerning that. I'm going to offer him as an expert in the field of civil engineering. I also have Laura Tedesco from the Philadelphia Sign Company, and she's an expert in signs and rebranding. And additionally, the planner for the variances, Andrew Janu from Beacon Planning. What I would like to suggest to the board, and we've had success with this in some other campuses, I was going to let Mr. McCabe will describe the signs, and then Ms. Tedesco would be available to add any detail of the actual sign design, coloring, or questions about that may come up. And I think that would be an efficient way to proceed through this, if it's okay with you.
So why don't we swear them both in?
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? State and spell your name for the record.
I do. Peter McCabe, MC, capital C-A-B-E, with Dewberry Engineering, 600 Parsippany Road, Parsippany, New Jersey. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey, a professional engineer licensed in the state of New Jersey, and have testified before numerous boards in the state.
We'll accept your credentials. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Tedesco?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
Laura Tedesco, Tedesco.
Thank you.
I'm with Philadelphia Sign Company in Palmyra, New
Tell the
Jersey.
board about your experience in signs and design and preparing rebranding packages such as this.
Yes, I've worked with Philadelphia Sign for over 10 years on various rebranding projects for hospitals, banks in this region and across the country.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask the board to accept into evidence a exhibit that was prepared by Ms. Tedesco, which outlines, shows each of the signs in an image of what they will be. And I've brought a copy to go to each board member, and of course one for the file.
Was this included in the filing, or is this something new?
This is supplemental to the filing. This is a more recent compilation.
Okay, then we're going to mark that as A1.
A1. Okay, we'll put that there, and then there is a copy for everyone. So that We'll go, what I'm going to try and do to move this along, we'll go through the signs. They're each identified by designation. Mr. McCabe will identify the site, any variances or issues related to the sign, and then we'll have the image in front of us, and if there are questions about the image, we'll have Ms. Tedesco address that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, also, the exhibit that's on the easel was part of the plan set. Do you wish to mark that independently?
If it's part of the plan set, no, unless it's colorized or marked.
Thank you. So, with your permission, I'll begin with Mr.
Okay.
All right, so, Mr. McCabe, just for purposes of the record, identify the location of the Raritan Bay Medical Center.
Surely. It's located at the northbound intersection of Ferry Road and US Highway 18. It's comprised of block 17,000 lots 2811, 2812, and 28111. And in block 17012, it's also comprised of lot 2814. It's in the hospital H zone.
Okay. So, with regard to Exhibit A1, let's begin. I think if we turn to the front page, the first page identifies the location, and on that page, it identifies the location for a sign labeled as E2.
Right. So that's
Describe E2 to the board.
Sure. E2 is one of the pylon signs, and it's an existing pylon sign, and it's being refaced as part of this rebranding application. There's no structural changes to it, so it does have a series of variances, but those are all pre-existing conditions. There was a question by the in the planner's review about the illuminated, or I should say the LED message board, and we approximate that to be, you know, it's like 4 by 10 is the rough area that was questioned there. In terms of, like I said, in terms of the proposed sign, there are variances for sign illumination, sign area, and sign height.
Okay, with regard to the area, what are we requesting?
A sign area of 132 square feet per face is existing and is proposed to remain.
Okay, and likewise, the sign height of 22 feet is existing and proposed to remain.
Correct.
If I could direct the board to the third page of the exhibit, it shows signs E2, which are being refaced.
We need to E3, or E3 is the other pylon sign.
I'm sorry, E3.
And E3, I can point to the location on C100. It's closer to this driveway here along Ferry Road, right by the main driveway that accesses the medical center. And that proposed sign is 12 feet high, 6'6" wide. But it also requires variances for setback to the right-of-way, setback to the pavement. The sign will be illuminated, so there's a requirement for that, or that's a variance requested. And then there's a sign area variance and a sign height variance.
And that is an existing sign, again, to be rebranded.
Well, that sign is actually being reconstructed, and it's a couple of feet taller.
Okay.
They will not.
In fact, that, if you turn to the next page in the exhibit E3, is available for view. Mr. Chairman, I know this is not necessarily usual, but unless there are questions about the design or the face, I'll just keep proceeding with the engineering, and if there are, then Ms. Tedesco can address that. Okay, so that's the two existing signs, and then
We can go to building 1.
then the new sign locations for the wall, N01A.
Yes.
And in this area, and the exhibit, the next page in your exhibit demonstrates 8 wall signs. Is that correct, Peter?
Yes. And I can break these down by building, and I think that's the easiest order to address them. And I believe that's the order that they fall in the exhibits. Well, no, they don't. Okay. I can go no, N03. Right. So I'm just going to direct your attention. There's 3 buildings. and Building 3 is the westernmost one here. And there's 3 signs that are proposed on the western elevation and 2 signs that are proposed on the eastern elevation. So they're referred to in here as NO3A, B, and C on the western facade. And the first one, NO3A, is a Hackensack Meridian Health and Raritan Bay Medical Center Old Bridge sign.
Excuse me one second. 5th page has an illustration of each of the signs.
So this is a fascia sign identifying, like I just described, the medical center, and it's not lit. It's 40 inches high, and the full length of it is 124 feet, so it extends across the top of the building there, as you can see, the facade. Also on the western facade is a lit sign, but that's just the identifying 2. Yeah, so I confused myself for a second. This is actually Building 2 that's on the west there, but it's the NO3, A, B, and C. So on the west side, it has that Hackensack Meridian sign. It has the western, it has the number 2 sign, and then it has a Hackensack Meridian Health logo, which is not lit. And on the eastern side of that same building, Building 2, there's an unlit logo and a lit number 2 sign.
That is NO4A and NO4B.
Right.
And that is the next page in Exhibit A1. What we're trying to do with the testimony is follow through page by page for the exhibit. Okay.
So then the next building is building number 1. There's
Again, the very next page in Exhibit A, A1, and the sign NO1A and NO1B.
So NO1A is again a fascia illuminated sign identifying Hackensack Meridian Health and Raritan Bay Medical Center, Old Bridge. And that's 5 foot 5 inches high and 139 feet wide, and that is lit. So that requires a sign illumination variance. NO1B, again, is just the building number, and that's lit. That's the number 1 for Building 1. And the Building 1 is the building that's long ways here in between. This building also is going to facilitate a future marketing banner location. And there was a question in the planner's review about what the anticipated size of that was. And it's able to handle about an 8-foot by 25-foot banner, 25-foot high, 8-foot wide. That's an approximation. And all of these, one of the planner's comments was whether or not there was any exceedance of the facade area percentage, which is permitted to be 10%. And all of these facades, we evaluated them, calculated them, and they're all well under the 10%. The highest percentage was 6%.
I would, Mr. Tedesco, did you prepare this exhibit to demonstrate the banner location?
Yeah, this is to demonstrate the banner sample of the size.
Okay. Could I ask this, and this was prepared by you or others under your direction for presentation to this board?
Yes.
Could I ask this be marked as A2, please? And Peter, this is where the banner would be?
This is a sample of the banner. It's not actually a photo of the subject site. So it's just an example of the kind of banner that we expect would be on that facade at that location, as marked on our plan.
And I can represent to the board that it's the intention of Hackensack Meridian to use that to make the public aware of new services, other features or events that are going to occur, training programs or things that would be of interest to the general public. And that would change from time to time.
Static sign, though, it's not a...
Basically, yes. It's not, this is not to be illuminated.
Right,
It's just
a
going to...
flex material.
A flex material will be changed out from time to time.
Out on the middle one?
From building number 1.
Building 1. In
Would you
the
show on
corner.
the,
Yeah, it's in,
on exhibit, on the plan set where it is?
it's actually, it's on the same facade as was calculated for Building 1, but it's right in the corner here, on the south-facing facade of Building 3. So it's in this corner, facing out towards Ferry Road.
On the second to last page of your exhibit.
Yes, it is, yep. On the lower picture there, it says future marketing banner location. So it was calculated in the facade with Building 1's south-facing facade, but it's actually on the corner of Building 3. So then moving to Building 3, which is the last, and it's the building on the west over here. There's a sign NO2, that's the building number 3, which will be lit. And that facade percentage is well under 1% of the total facade. And then there was a question about whether or not that would be removed, the existing Old Bridge Medical Arts Building, and yes, that is planned to be removed. You can see that on your last page of the exhibit NO2. So the only thing that's going on this face, the east face, the west face of Building 3, is the building number 3, but this is coming down, the existing.
So, Peter, each of these buildings will have a designation, 1, 2, and 3, readily visible to anyone entering the campus?
Yes.
And then the others are signs designating the logo and the hospital and the banner sign with the events?
Correct.
So the 1, 2, and 3, are they going to say what's in each building? Or, I mean,
No,
so they aren't going to know the hospital from the medical arts building from the,
it's just going to be, it's going to be by number. So the patients will be advised which room, which building to go into.
There's directional signage, which is different than, this is branding signs.
so these are just all branding signs? No
Yeah, there are
directional
directional signs on the campus now.
The ground signs are the directional signs.
Speak up.
The ground signs direct patients where to go, and the building signs are just IDs for each building, 1, 2, and 3.
I don't know. When I go in, I find it really confusing.
So are there any additional signs being proposed, Peter?
No, I believe we covered them.
Okay. That's the proposal for the branding signs, and I have no other questions of these witnesses, other than to answer any questions of the board, and then I would call Mr. Janu to address the variances.
Okay, I don't, Bina, do you have any questions?
I just want to add on, in my memo where I have a list of variances, since the banner sign is going to be retained, the one for future marketing banner location, that's going to be an additional variance based on Section 250-52G10, banner signs are prohibited in all zoning districts, and that would need a variance.
All right, does anybody from the board have any questions? Yes,
E3.
Erwin.
On E3, you, I guess, thinned it out, made it taller, but the whole bottom part is blank. What is the future for that?
For which, I didn't follow your question.
E3.
E3?
Yeah. It's one of the entrance,
Yeah, that could be used for future directional. I understand there's another project taking place in the future, so we left space.
That for the new emergency room and the
Right,
and the
to
modifications
redirect
to the
patients.
The hospital has an approval pending, and, okay?
that's it.
Okay, anyone else from the board have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, Andrew Janu, please. Thank you, Pete. I'm going to offer Mr. Janu as an expert in professional planning.
Good evening. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
My name is Andrew Janu, Janiw, with the firm of Beacon Planning and Consulting Services, 315 Highway 34, Colts Neck, New Jersey.
Andy, would you advise the board of your credentials and licensing?
Certainly. I am a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've testified throughout the state of New Jersey as a planner. I'm currently serving as the planner for the Borough of Carteret, and thank you.
So, with regard to this application, it requires several variances and continuation of some existing variances. Have you had an opportunity to review the application?
I have. In preparation for this evening, I reviewed the application. I've been to the facility. I've also looked at your master plan, your ordinances, as well as reviewed your planner's memorandum. And without repeating all the variances we're requesting, I agree with the characterization of the variances. What we're here for this evening really is a change in the branding sign program. As you know, the Raritan Bay Medical Center is being rebranded with its new ownership and merger, and what we're trying to do is create a sign program that not only rebrands the facility but also eases identification of buildings and what the facilities in fact do. So to that extent, what we have is a program that's been carefully developed to propose signage that is an easy identification for patients or for emergency vehicles or for anyone coming to the hospital, visitors and alike. It's a program that identifies the facility, also advertises and potentially notifies the public of programs through the reader boards and the potential banner signs of things that will be occurring at the facility. It's been very carefully thought out and placed so that it's easily identified, easily recognized. It's a trademarked brand. That's something that's intended to be identifiable because there are other facilities throughout the state of New Jersey with the similar branding. So it's intended to negotiate that recognition. What we're looking for is basically C variances tonight. They're bulk variances. The variances would all qualify under the C2 criteria, meaning that they're, on balance, a better zoning alternative than if we were to be compliant with your ordinances. Your master plan, it's properly brought out by your planner, is relatively silent with respect to the H hospital district here. However, your master plan recognizes that it is a key employer for the area. It is also a provider of critical health care services within the area. It's not only permitted within your zone, but it's also recognized by the municipal land use law as an inherently beneficial use, meaning it's universally recognized as a benefit to the public and something of good to the public. So when we look at the standards for the C2 variance, we have to indicate that the application, in fact, relates to a specific piece of property. It does. That the purposes of the municipal land use law would be advanced by this deviation. And in this instance, we've identified at least two purposes that would be advanced. The first is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of lands in the state of New Jersey, which will promote the public's health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Again, the sign program is stipulated such that it will provide for ease and recognition of what's considered an inherently beneficial use, as well as an ease of identification for the transporting public to and from the facility. We also adhere to item D within the MLUL, which is to promote desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. Again, the sign program very carefully thought out to provide ease of identification of the facility and maneuvering within the facility, such as the numbering of the buildings. We finally have to, within the positive criteria, discuss that the benefits of the deviation would outweigh any detriment. And in fact, it is of the opinion that the benefits here do outweigh any detriments. The benefits here, obviously, are for not only the co-branding and recognition, but for the ease of location of the facility. With respect to the negative criteria, quite frankly, I don't see any with respect to anything that would create a substantial detriment to the public good. We're not creating anything or proposing anything that's going to provide any additional noise. noise, any additional traffic, any additional, any of the nuisance features which would typically be associated with the negative criteria. And that the variances would also not substantially impair the intent or purpose of the zone plan or zoning ordinance. There aren't specific requirements within the age zone for hospital signage. Your planner rightfully identified portions of the ordinance which would apply here and what standards we would deviate from. I agree with that analysis, and I do offer for this board that the variances that are being requested, primarily with respect to size of signage, illumination of signage, location of signage, are all intended to work as a cohesive program for the facility and identification of the facility. It's not going to do anything to impair the intent of your zone plan. The zone plan recognizes the hospital as something that's important to the area, and we certainly feel that we further and continue to improve the hospital facility through this application as well as the pending application on the emergency room. So on balance, I think this is a good application. I certainly think the board can consider this in an affirmative manner, and we ask for you to do so.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to just report to you and the board that it's my understanding that the application for the emergency room has satisfied compliance, and they're either have scheduled or recently had or planning the pre-construction meetings. So that work will soon get underway. And you know, the entire Hackensack system throughout the state is going through this rebranding. We're going all around to various towns and boards to get these similar approvals. And, you know, they're really trying to reach out to the community in a way that would make it unified and recognize the services available. So I would ask the board to consider the application. I have no other witnesses, but any questions that may exist, we're certainly prepared to answer.
Okay. We just say, our planner, do you have any
I have none.
comments or questions?
Nope, I have none.
Engineer, you don't?
I have absolutely nothing.
Okay, what about the board? Any comments or questions? Okay, I'll open it to the public. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the signage? Give your name and address, please.
Raj Shah, 10 Mariposa, Old Bridge.
Spell your name, please.
R-A-J, last name Shah, S-H-A-H. I would like actually board and our engineers to consider two things. There is a national and New Jersey adopted energy code. Here we are talking about so many illuminated sign, 150 by 5 feet, 26 by 8 feet. I mean, how much energy are we going to waste? Second thing, all these shoebox light poles have a reason for the height and also to, you know, the shine down. Here putting a 4 or 5 story high, you know, such a light illuminated. What is the nuisance on all the neighborhood? And then all other businesses gonna come and look for 5, 6 variances, like here we are ready to grant them. What would be the condition of the neighborhood with all the lighted signs? Thank you.
The hospital and the entire system are well aware of the upcoming proposals for energy modification. They're looking at a number of different options throughout the system. However, until that is generally available and the standards are described, what's being done here is clearly intended to make it visible to anyone entering the campus and to have them safely negotiate through the campus to their area. And yes, it's unfortunate in a way, but the hospital, I think, does have to be well illuminated. Otherwise, you have emergency vehicles arriving and people coming and going throughout the 24-hour period. There's no, I don't have a solution to turning off the lights and still being able to have our clients deliver the medical services that citizens may need.
Madam Chairperson, a question.
Yes.
You already have signs there, and you're proposing these new signs at the same location. What is there a difference in the candle power that's coming off of these signs?
The new signs are new LEDs. These signs are at least 10, 15 years old. Also, all the ground signs that are illuminated now are being replaced, and the majority of the wall signs are non-illuminated. Most of the new signs that we're proposing are non-illuminated.
So the two new signs that are illuminated, they're LED,
The LED.
right, and there's not much difference in the candle power coming off of the old ones to the new ones?
Right, they're much more energy efficient than what's currently.
No, I meant light.
Oh,
The LED lights,
Candle foot
projection.
power, you know.
Spillage.
Brighter than currently?
Right.
Yeah, it is brighter. Which is something that we can control. We can reduce the number of LEDs inside the sign.
You can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, anyone else from the public? Okay, I'll close the public portion. Do you-
There are neighboring,
Actually, yeah,
The setback.
the comment is, it's generally in an area where there aren't any neighbors facing these signage. This is, if you know, Ferry Road and Route 18 at that point. It's a
Well, they are
fairly-
across the street.
Yeah.
So this is application for preliminary and final major site plan approval for sign variances for rebranding the hospital property. The variances are outlined in the planning memo, and we're going to include the addition of the variance for the banner sign as requested. I don't believe there are any conditions except for what's in the memos, correct? Okay.
Okay, anything from the board? Okay, do we have a motion? Moved by Mr. Belushi, second. Second by Mr. Lenning. Roll call.
Yeah, based on the testimony that the lights can be dulled if they need to be, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamek?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lennon?
Yes.
Mr. Luca?
No, I do recognize the inherent benefit that the hospital provides, in thinking of the signage ordinance. I'm thinking about how it serves to identify and also direct. The reason I'm saying no is because I find directions, lacking. There's a lot of branding and logos and less so much.
Just do keep in mind, these are the only portion of the sign rebranding package that required variances to come before the board. There are other signs that do have permits. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to Foxborough. Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order. Okay, where am I? Where's my agenda? Agenda. I gotta give the application number. Okay. Okay, application 24-19, oh no, I'm sorry, 38-18P, RD Management Corp-F, preliminary and final major site plan blocks 16004, lot 53. Mr. Pate.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, board professionals, and public, good evening. My name is Kenneth Pape. I'm an attorney with Heilbron Pape, and it's our responsibility and privilege to represent your applicant, RD Management, this evening. This is an application that began in April and was heard briefly for a few minutes in August, and we are here on a continued hearing basis. At the conclusion of the meeting in August, it was announced that this application was continued without the requirement of renotice or republication, and that the board had retained jurisdiction. And it's under those rules that we proceed this evening. The application, the last time a substantive presentation in this application was presented to the board was at the first week of April. And at that time, we identified that the property was that the applicant was seeking to develop the property consistent with the ordinance, that it was approximately 32,000 square feet of general retail and a convenience store with fueling facilities. And we presented the application to you through the professional witnesses, Michael Pucci, the design engineer, and John Ray, the traffic expert. There was an opportunity for the board's professionals, and the public to comment on the application. And one of the comments that came through was the concern that there was not an egress from the site out onto Highway 18. There was only ingress. Ingress from Route 18, and the egress route was on the side street, Foxborough. And the board may recall the applicant asked for permission to meet with the board's professionals, and especially with Deanna Drum, your board traffic expert. And the reason that we asked to meet with Ms. Drum was that she had indicated that she felt that there may be a way to get egress out onto Route 18. And since we were last here, we met with Ms. Drum. We also went down to the DOT with the plans, and after having a pre-application meeting, we've made a new application to the DOT. I left out that when we came to you in April, we had already received our DOT approval. And part of our DOT approval was that they had denied us the egress out onto Route 18. So we went back this past summer, and a new design was created. That application is pending. With the assistance of Ms. Drum, we were able to present an application that appears to be fully conforming with the DOT's requirements, and we have every expectation that that driveway system will be approved. That is the main change to the plans that we'll present to you this evening. Mr. Michael Pucci will take us through the site plan generally, just because it's been 6 months since we were before you. Mr. Ray will take us through the revisions to the circulation and the status of our application with the DOT. And then I also have Mr. Rob Larson, who is a planner and architect, who, if time allows, will address the architecture of the building and the signage. And there's also some limited bulk variance relief that remains on the site, and we'll present the proofs on that. With your permission, Madam Chair, Michael Pucci has been sworn. He was sworn in April. Michael Pucci's credentials are on the record. He was qualified to testify as a professional engineer. And with your permission, I'll go right to Mr. Pucci, remind him that he's under oath, and begin the presentation of the substantive presentation.
Madam Chair? Hi, before any testimony is heard, I need to go on record to recuse myself from hearing this application. I'm a member of the Foxborough Village HOA, and hearing this application will be a conflict of interest.
Go ahead.
Okay. May we begin?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Pucci, I remind you that you're under oath, that you were placed under oath at the April meeting. I'm going to ask that you introduce to the board the new exhibits that you have prepared. I show that in April we left off at A3. Ms. Carey, is that consistent with your note?
A3 is the last one I have.
Last one, so we're beginning with A4. You could tell us what's A4.
A4 is the site plan colored up to indicate all the proposed landscaping on it. This is consistent with what was introduced as A3 with updates. A3 is what you see on the screen right now. Sure. That is the color site plan that was presented back in April, and it does show in the center there. I'll just point to A4. Actually, I will show you A3, the hard copy. What Mr. Pape alluded to, the prior application showed ingress only from Route 18, right here in the middle of the site, aimed right at the main retail building. And ingress and egress from Foxborough Drive. As Mr. Pape described, subsequent to that meeting with your professionals and then a meeting with DOT that I attended with the traffic engineer and your traffic engineer, we have come up with a revised plan that shows ingress and egress from and back to Route 18 at the southerly end of the property. In doing so, we've been able to take out the entrance driveway, the ingress-only driveway, which went right to a middle aisle that was shown on the screen a moment ago, and now have the main drive aisle either around the back or come across the front of the property. In reconfiguring the front of the building to get rid of that main drive aisle aimed towards the building, we've been able to set the parking a little more consistent with standard design techniques in front of a building for this purpose. And we've also been able to increase the parking count. The general layout of the parking, the massing of where the buildings are hasn't really changed. It's the circulation and the access into, and most importantly, egress from the site back onto 18 that has changed. The grading, if you will, the elevations of the proposed pavement, still consistent with what was done before. De minimis changes just because an island might have moved a little bit, but the entire drainage of the parking lot, our parking lots and paved areas and roof areas is consistent with what was submitted in the past, and it is everything drains to the expanded detention basin. As Mr. Pape said in the very beginning, and as I testified to in April, there's an existing basin at the southern end of the property. That basin is being expanded to account for and control all of the runoff from the project. The existing basin was done for a project that was approved many years ago under many iterations of older design standards. This basin now complies with current design standards.
I'm going to ask you to stop just for a second. Would you read the title block in so that the title block and its date match what's on the record for A4?
Preliminary and final site plan, Foxborough Plaza, sheet 4 of 14.
And
it is what is shown in the submitted plans that you all have with you.
The date and the revision date, please.
Original date, August 30th of 18, revised through August 13th of 19.
I'm going to just go through a couple of very simple questions before we return to your the narrative presentation. This plan is different from A3 in that the driveway location has been changed. You've indicated that. And the driveway now has an opportunity for vehicles to leave the site and go directly onto Route 18. That's the main change in this plan?
That is correct.
The grading plan that was reviewed and presented to the board, reviewed by the board's professionals and presented to the board in April, the grading plan is virtually the same?
That's correct.
The grading plan is still towards the...
Everything goes to the basin.
Everything goes to the basin. And your drainage system, again, a private drainage system owned and maintained by the property owner?
Correct.
And you testified previously, but if you could just confirm that with these minor changes, your testimony remains that all of the township's requirements and all of the DEP requirements for stormwater management are met by your design?
That is correct.
So those are the things that, the volume of water that is stored, the rate of water that is discharged, the recharging of water, all of those elements are part of your stormwater plan, and all of the testimony that you shared with the board previously remains applicable to this stormwater system.
Yes.
You also indicated that the parking has been modified slightly. I imagine that the parking, some of those revisions were driven by the new driveway location, which would then require some modification of parking location. Is that
of course.
part? And the driveway location was previously in the middle of the site, which was found to be objectionable by some of the professionals, indicating that traffic went right up into the middle of the parking lot. So I believe that it's accurate that that's no longer the case, that the driveway system now comes in at the southern end of the site and is aligned not with a parking field, but with a main travel way on site.
Correct, a drive aisle, if you will.
A drive aisle. And you've also indicated that the parking numbers were increased as a result of these changes. Could you share that empirical information with the board?
Okay. The parking load or parking requirement for the proposed development is stated in the reports as 253, but it is actually 199, and that comes about from the nature of the large brown building, if you will. Buildings B and C, which are really one big building. It was just called B and C for purposes of marketing and or demarcation. But what we have is one building here. This one building, and the architect will speak after me and describe the building and show you pictures of it and floor plan descriptions of how it will be subdivided or leased out to various occupants or tenants. As long as it has 5 or more spaces, that is 5 or more tenants, this would generate a parking load under your ordinance of 5 spaces per 1,000. If it were a small development, less than 5, then it would generate a parking requirement of 1 per 150 square feet, or 6.3 per 1,000. So the required number of parking spaces between the 5,000 small, 1 per 150, the 16.2 times 2, or 32.4, and also the gas station itself requiring 3 additional parking spaces. We need 199. The plan presented to you in April coincidentally had 199 by divine intervention. The current plan you see today has 211, so we exceed the ordinance requirements. All parking spaces shown on the site comply with your dimensional requirements of 10 by 20, 10 feet wide, 20 feet long, with the exception of the handicap spaces, which comply with the ADA requirements of 8 feet wide for a van accessible space, or any space, 8 feet wide for all van accessible loading areas.
So the on-site circulation plan now has a connection, ingress and egress to Route 18, and has a circulation system where the driveway is directly connected to a main aisle, and the parking went up. The on-site parking went up. All those are part of your revised plan.
That is correct.
Let's talk about landscaping briefly. On both of the plans, there was landscaping along the highway and there was landscaping behind the building. We have a residential community behind us, and we have a buffer or a physical separation requirement. What is the ordinance's requirement for the physical separation between the edge of our development and the beginning of the residential community?
The requirement is for a buffer of 25 feet around the back of the property. We have a physical separation in the old plan where the retaining wall that sort of supports the development and is at the edge of the developed portion of the site was shown at 70 feet away from that property line, far in excess of the requirement. The new plan, as we've modified it, contains 2 bump outs for dumpsters. The back side of the bump outs, that portion of the retaining wall that holds the dumpsters for the retail space, is still at that 70 feet. The remainder of that has been pushed another 10 feet closer to the building, or to the highway really, and to the building. So that is now 80 feet from the property line. That was in response to comments raised by Mr. Hart with locations of dumpsters required to build in their proximity to buildings.
So the 80 feet separation physically far exceeds the ordinance's requirement.
Correct.
And it looks like there's a lot of green in that area. If you could describe generically the landscape plan that is offered.
What is offered right now is there is existing vegetation, trees in that area, which you see in these larger green dots, if you will. We are proposing some supplemental vegetation at this location where the drive aisle would have the potential for headlights to be aimed in towards the gap between 2 existing homes. However, we agree that we will sit with your professionals and supplement the landscaping in this area to their satisfaction.
Concerns were brought to our attention by this board, by the board's professionals and the public, that the supplemental materials there should be an emphasis on evergreens. We stipulate that we are pleased to work with this board and with the professionals to accomplish a landscaping scheme that is satisfactory to all. We've made 80 feet available where 25 feet is required. When we first presented the application to you, our goal was to create additional space behind the building, and we asked for variance relief for this front yard setback. Since the application was filed, there's been a change in the ordinance. I believe that the variance relief that we asked for is no longer required. I believe I'm stating it accurately when I say that we previously had an ordinance that said 75 feet between the highway and the beginning of the parking lot, and now that has been reduced.
Well, I guess that's a bit of a question.
No, it's okay.
The question that we had was regarding when the EDO 3 ordinance that was revised, because it was revised in March of 29. So the ordinance that applies would be at the time of application ordinance, right? Now that's I guess a question for Ms. Carey, as far as which ordinance would apply. The EDO 3 was actually modified after your application was submitted.
I believe this application was submitted prior to the amendment to the EDO zone ordinance. And so in my opinion, the first one still is valid. The new one doesn't apply. But
And the board's hands are tied. We must apply the application that was at the time of application unless the applicant requests that the new one be applied.
Right.
So my only question is, would you prefer that? And you can't pick and choose.
No,
It just
absolutely.
you do one or the other, because you can't take something from one ordinance and something from the other. But I understand the changes are very minimal. So if the applicant requests that it be applied under the new zoning, then we can do that. But the board can't make the determination they would need to.
but I'm not sure if, picking the new one might trigger newer variances because now the new EDO ordinance has a minimum front yard and a maximum front yard setback. So I'll have to review the application against the newer ordinance and see which newer variances are triggered.
The answer to the question is this. As I began my statement, when we first presented the application, we asked for variance relief for the front so that we could accumulate additional green area in the rear. Since we filed the application, the ordinance has changed, and the dimension for the green area in the front is now 25 feet. And we're at, Michael, we're at 30?
Correct.
And we're at 30 feet. I leave it to the board as to whether that is a variance. I do not believe that it is a variance. Your applicant is asking that the board apply the EDO 3 changes. But whether it's a variance or it's not a variance, it's certainly consistent with the standard that exists in your ordinance today, and its purpose of 30 feet was to accumulate the extra area in the rear. So whether we call it a variance or we don't call it a variance, I think it's very safe to say that we are consistent with what your ordinance now requires as a green area along the highway. With regard to the landscaping area, there were suggestions that there be supplemental landscaping along the street frontage and that there be supplemental landscaping throughout the parking field. Did you modify the plan to include supplemental landscaping?
We've added supplemental landscaping within the parking fields. Previously, there were smaller shrubbery and/or some small ornamental trees throughout the islands of the parking. We've now added larger trees, and we agree to work with your professionals to supplement and infill, if you will, between the street frontage trees to the extent that those street frontage trees remain nice, tall, columnar trees, but that the infill that we might add is aesthetically pleasing, yet does not screen and hide the building, because as a retail building, the visibility is important.
There are monument signs that are shown on the property, and we'll go to the signs in a moment, but I'd ask if you could advise the board that the applicant can and will create a landscaping at the base of the signs as requested.
That is correct. They have not been landscaped yet, partially because we offer you two options for the main sign in the front. We have what we will call sign B off on Foxborough Drive, and sign A has two optional locations, one out here right by the egress driveway, if DOT will allow it. Now, it is within DOT's right-of-way. If they allow it, then it would require relief from your ordinance prohibiting it being outside the property, but it's a preferential location for visibility. If that is not allowed by DOT, then we have a secondary location within the property. And then back within the property where we're going to put the sign, that does not require relief from your ordinance. And when we know exactly where it will wind up, we will supplement landscaping around the base of both the A sign, if you will, up on 18, and the B sign back on Foxborough Drive.
Would you describe, and I believe it's the same as when we were here in April, but if you would describe to the board the parking lot lighting scheme, the type of light bulb and the height of the light fixture that we're asking this board to consider favorably.
We are consistent with what was shown to you in April with the minor modification of the location of the poles. All of the lights are proposed to be LED lights, downward facing. They will all be on poles that we are requesting a mounting height waiver of 20 feet as opposed to your ordinance standard of 18 feet. There was a misrepresentation or misread of the plans in the earlier reports that said we were looking for 25. We're actually looking for 20, which does require a waiver from your ordinance of a maximum of 18 feet height. But that allows us to space the poles a little further apart, still provide adequate lighting, and reduce the number of poles. All of the poles and all the lights will be provided with shields, especially the light poles that are lighting the back driveway here. Those few light poles have their fixtures aimed forward, that is towards Route 18, as do the lights along the perimeter here have their lights aimed inward. And the backside, if you will, are given what we are called house shields. Basically, it's a vertical cutoff that minimizes any potential light spillage to the back of that shield. And within the lighting plans that were submitted to your engineer, we not only provide the isolux patterns, which tells you how much light will hit the ground at various distances, but also what's known as a point-to-point distribution at a grid pattern that shows the amount of light hitting the ground at every single point in that grid so that your engineer can confirm we have no light spillage off-site.
You and Rakesh are probably the only two people in the room who can read that lighting plan, but will you place on the record that the lighting plan clearly demonstrates that there is no spillage from the proposed lights onto the residential community?
Absolutely none.
Absolutely not at all.
That's correct.
And the last 80 feet of lands behind the property have no lighting in it at all? That's all the buffer and landscaping?
That is correct.
You also had earlier, as part of your earlier testimony, you had identified that there were loading opportunities on the site. I'm going to ask if you could just, again, for the record, identify those loading opportunities to the board.
In the April plan, what was shown as a loading area for Building A, the small convenience mart near the gas facility, was alongside the building to its southerly side. This has been reconfigured, and there is now a much larger loading zone located within an island behind the building. And in conjunction with that, there was also previously the trash enclosure located in the frontage of the property along Foxborough Drive, and that was relocated. It was a suggestion raised by several professionals. So they have been relocated into this island. So Building A now has a loading zone behind it, much larger than what was previously shown. Building BC has a loading zone across the entire back, as it did before. It was much wider in the past, and it had the dumpsters adjacent to the building. That has been flipped now. The dumpsters, as I mentioned, were pushed out to the limits of where we had previously shown the retaining wall and the development to the east towards the residences. But the development itself, the retaining wall and the driveway, have all moved to the west towards Route 18. And the loading zone remains about 250 feet long across the back of this building. Now, that can be parsed out and minimized as need be once the internal demarcation of the building sets where the doors might be. And there was a comment about placing bollards to protect doors. Of course that will be done.
We received new professional reports from the board's professionals, and I know that you've had an opportunity to review those professional reports. There are a number of technical recommendations, and there are a number of items that really require your exchange with the professionals to come to a mutually agreeable conclusion. I'm going to ask, are you comfortable? Have you read through those reports?
I've read through them in great detail.
And I'm going to ask if you're comfortable advising the board that it's your intention to meet with the board's professionals, as we have prior to this meeting, to once again go through those to identify how the technical recommendations can be addressed.
Yes.
Comfortable that you can meet with
I'm very comfortable. There is nothing in here that I would call a deal breaker by any means. Everything is either clarification or a simple yes.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I have nothing further of Mr. Pucci. Mr. Pucci is the design engineer, the design engineer, and he is now available to the board and to the public for examination, if that is your pleasure. We're prepared to go to the next witness. when
Okay,
directed.
first I'm going to go to our professionals, our planner.
I just have one question. Like, can you go back to the parking issue? Because I know that when we reviewed the application the first time, it was an assumption that it'll be more than 2 stores. And we had said that a parking variance will not be required because 199 spaces are required and 199 were proposed. I did have a conversation with the architect, and I was told that now it's going to be 2 stores, wherein
A minimum of 5.
okay, so the 199 still is valid.
Yes, that was the
Required.
testimony.
The proposed is actually 211.
Right. So the required is 199. You're proposing 211. So there is no parking variance that is involved. Correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
And going back to the buffer variance, if you choose to pick the newer EDO3 ordinance and that eliminates the buffer requirement, so would that mean that you would have room to slide down the buildings even further by 5 feet since you have a buffer of 30 feet? Because that pushes the building away, the loading area, the service road away from the residences even further by 5 feet.
I see no reason why the whole picture can't just slide 5 feet.
Right, because 25 feet is required, you are at 30 feet, correct?
Thank you.
No problem.
We slid it to a point where we thought we had left enough green area that we could ask for the variance, but with the standard being reduced to 25, I think that Ms. Sawant's recommendation or suggestion is excellent.
Our engineer, do you have?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our report is dated September 24th. Like Mr. Pape had said, that we did have a previous review letter that was, and we had an opportunity to meet with the applicant and their professionals, and the plans have been revised to address quite a few of the comments in our letter. A lot of the stuff that we have is mostly technical and detail oriented. We did have some items that we wanted some testimony on. One is regarding the permitting. As far as your DEP permits for the freshwater wetlands and transition area waiver, obviously the previous approvals have expired. What's the status of your approvals for this application?
The LOI remains valid, and we had submitted an application for some general permits, but we withdrew that application. We have not refiled the application because in order to file that application, we need clear and concise approval and direction from the DOT, because once the DOT establishes how we're going to access the site, we believe that what you see on the board is completely permittable by them. Then we have to go back and get DEP to grant the requisite wetlands permits for the crossing of the ditch. But we can't file that application until DOT acts first.
At that time, are you also going to put in for the, I guess you can say, an update to your general permit for the stormwater as well at that time? It'll be all reviewed as part of that permit, is that
That is correct. Stormwater management will be a part of that as well as a part of the DOT review.
And just for the DEP's freshwater wetland letter of interpretation is not old. It's January 2017.
I was referring to the general permits and everything from the previous approval. This does require some general permits from DEP.
That's be re-permitted.
And the answer is that they haven't been applied for yet, but they will be, pending approval from this board.
Yes, sir. We've got more.
We did have a couple of items in our letter, and I know Mr. Pucci said that they do agree to our comments. We had some concerns, as did Ms. Drum, about the circulation in the area of the new loading zone, the interaction between the parking spaces in the back, the trash enclosure, which I think can be solved with some reconfiguration. Is that something that I imagine you're not requesting preliminary and final approval? We're doing preliminary only? Is that correct?
You know, I'm the applicant's attorney, I want a building permit, but if you want to
Nah,
stop,
I'm with you.
stop at preliminary approval, we'd certainly understand that.
No, I mean, the only reason I ask is because I would be inclined to say that these items are things that we can probably resolve. If the board acts favorably on a preliminary approval, it's something that can get done as part of a final approval, so I asked that way.
We're very comfortable with that procedure. We're very comfortable.
Given that, I think most of the items, like Mr. Pucci said, they'll be able to address, and I think it's something we can get addressed as part of any future revisions.
Okay, are you going to have a traffic person?
I am, next.
Okay, well, then I'll
And-
wait for you. And did you want us to have anything, Mr. Hurt?
Well, no, not if it's going to be preliminary, we can always address my comments then.
I think most of what you gave us, we worked into the plan, but we certainly will meet with Mr. Hart for his guidance and direction again.
Okay, then I'm going to open to the board, but I just want to ask, where, so the loading is going to be in the back of the office building or whatever that is?
Retail building.
Right, so where are, like, trash collection and that?
There are 3 trash collection points.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Pape, but we did have one question regarding the parking that I wanted to make sure we get addressed. Because we've had this issue before, and I think Mr. Drum may want to weigh in on this, when we have shopping centers of this type and the actual tenant mix is not defined, when you get restaurants put into the mix, that really affects your parking quite a bit. So I know that your representation is that you don't require a parking variance at this time, but if the tenant mix were to skew towards more restaurant, then you would require a parking variance. So can we get some information?
In the past, just to add on to it, in the past, when we had similar situations, we have required that there be no more than 30% of the development restricted to restaurant use, so that there is some control on the parking that is required by restaurants. And based on that, this would mean that there would be a restriction limit that restaurant use be no more than 9,700 square feet. So can you just shed some light on that?
Surely. We actually had reviewed this internally, and we're prepared to stipulate that the maximum square footage of restaurant area in the center would be 30%, or as Ms. Sawant has stated, approximately 9,700 square feet. If there were ever to be an opportunity to have a restaurant that exceeded that, we would agree that it requires an amended site plan and a return to this board for amended relief, including variance relief. We are very comfortable that 9,700 square feet as the restaurant element of a neighborhood commercial center it works just fine.
Thank you.
Okay, can we get back to the trash?
We can. There are 3 separate trash enclosures that Mr. Pucci has designed. One of them is behind
Right
the
behind Building
convenience
A.
store.
And then there are 2 behind Building BC.
And
They are
those
the
are,
little sand-colored dots that you see here, representing a concrete pad.
and those are worked into the wall. They're built in.
That is correct. There is a wall surrounding them.
There's a masonry wall around them, and there's an enclosure across the front of them.
So you couldn't relocate those to the side?
But the request was by the
request was to
fire
move
department
them.
to get them away from the building.
Oh,
When we came here in April, they were on the opposite side. They were against the building. But Mr. Hart noted that they are required to be a minimum of 20 feet from the building. So it was basically flipped. And they were put out at the edge of what was then the drive aisle. And the drive aisle itself moved in 10 feet. So they are no closer than the entire drive aisle that was shown in April to the back property line. And everything else was moved 10 feet to the west, if you will, towards Route 18.
all right, yes?
Somebody from the audience spoke. We didn't catch him on the, we're
Yeah,
going to get to that.
We're going to do the board first, and then I'm going to open it to the public, okay? So does anyone else from the board have any questions? Yes, Mr. Merwin.
How much square footage of building is allowed in the EDO3 zone?
It's controlled by impervious coverage and building coverage. And if you could just read into the record, do you have the zoning table?
I do. We are nowhere near any of the limitations.
Let's read them in.
I believe your FAR requires a .25. What are we at?
.35.
0.35, and we're at .25?
Yeah.
The FAR requires 0.35 and the proposed application is at 0.09.
So approximately 25% of what your ordinance contemplates could be built there.
The EDO 3 allows 48-foot height, and you are proposing 48-foot height. What are we putting in there that's 48 foot?
I'm not proposing 48-foot height. I will let the architect speak to the
Glasses,
height.
I got one size down, I see the less than. How high are they?
I will let the architect speak to that.
Architect will be up.
Okay, all right. And now that you decided that you're going under the EDO 3, right?
We are in the EDO 3
EDO
zone
3.
district,
And
yes.
has that changed any of your calculations?
We're going to have to do a review with the revised EDO 3. What, and like Ms. Savant said earlier, is the revisions to the EDO 3 put in requirements for minimum and maximum front yard setback. It did change the buffers to actually be less than what was required in the EDO 3. So there are some items or some parameters from the old EDO 3 that have actually been become less restrictive with the revisions with the new EDO 3 requirements.
From what I recollect, the floor area ratio, however, did not change from the original EDO to the new EDO. So if 0.35 is required, that didn't change. So applying the newer ordinance, it wouldn't really impact the FAR.
And just a question for our attorney. If this application was to be defeated for whatever purpose, if it was, would the previous approvals be null and void?
The approvals that were from back 20 years ago? whatever.
They're expired.
They're already expired.
They're already expired? Okay. Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else from the board have any questions? Yes.
It might be for our traffic professional, but when you're heading north and you enter into the proposed site, if you were to turn left to go towards the gas station, those first few spots, is there an issue with that when people backing out, somebody coming off the highway, they're doing highway speeds?
We'll have Mr. Ray speak to it, but if your engineer wishes to speak to it at this time,
Whoever
it'll be
you
fine.
think's, if you guys want to answer, that's great.
I think that's one of the reasons why we actually asked the applicant to revise their layout, because the previous layout actually was sweeping vehicles right into where the parking field is. With the revised layout, it actually funnels oncoming traffic into a drive aisle. So it's less of a concern with this revised layout. I mean, you may get somebody backing out that may be bumping into the drive aisle a little bit, but the oncoming vehicles, or the vehicles entering the site, would actually be to the right of that drive aisle. So it's less of a concern with this layout.
I just see like when, you know, if you're familiar with Route 18, there's no gas stations south, you know? So if you're headed north and you need gas, you're gonna whip right in and turn, so just.
And make that cut right across.
Yeah, you're going for it, you know, so
I'm with you.
if, you know, maybe eliminate one or two spots, we have extra spots.
Yeah,
You know, might
it's
just
something
an
we
idea,
definitely look
because,
at.
you know, I don't wanna see anybody get hurt because of
The
that.
site is overparked by 12 spaces, it looks like, so they could stand to lose a couple spaces and still not require variance.
Oh, yeah. That's all I got.
Anybody else have any comments, question?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Have you ever considered what our planner suggested about flipping the layout?
I can speak on behalf of our client. We did, and there aren't variances for the building locations. There's no relief requested. And from a marketing perspective, putting a gas station mid-block, it would seriously affect its viability. So we do not offer to flip-flop the buildings.
You're speaking about a drive aisle in the rear of the buildings, the retail buildings, and having driven behind a number of the retail buildings, it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's not very nice. And, yeah, and again, your entry through the gas station, you're going to cross the exiting traffic from the site.
Okay, I'm going to open it to the public, and it's on this testimony only that, so we're not getting into some of the other things that haven't been addressed yet, like traffic and so forth. But if you
Said it's
just give your name and
testimony. William A. Miller. I represent Foxborough Village Homeowners and Townhouse Association. I think the board recognizes that there are individual unit owners here who will speak for themselves, but I'm speaking on behalf of the Board of Trustees. I just had a few questions for Mr. Pucci. In directing your attention to the diagram at Foxborough Drive, there's still an exit toward the rear of the left of the property, correct? And what mechanism exists in that plan that would prevent any commercial vehicles from using that particular exit? Or in actuality, some ingress as well?
If I might, Mr. Ray prepared his testimony on the controls of that driveway. So with your indulgence, when Mr. Ray's up, we'll go right to that question.
All right, and I think Mr. Schmitz had already asked one of the questions. I thought the associations had a concern about possibly flipping the actual storage tanks of the gas to the opposite side, because that would place it further from Foxborough Drive. And Foxborough Drive is one of the primary means of entrance to Foxborough Village. So isn't that still a possibility that the gas station and the storage bins could be flipped to the opposite side of the property with the retail section closer to the actual residential street, Foxborough Drive?
There's nothing that physically prevents it. There's no relief requested for the buildings as placed. And our client, who is in the business of operating these facilities, has determined that this is the optimum location. So there is no offer to relocate the buildings.
Well, doesn't that in fact place the gasoline storage tanks closer to the residential street of Foxborough Drive? That's my question.
Oh, the tanks, not the buildings?
The tanks, yes, they would be closer to Foxborough Drive, as depicted on this diagram, correct?
The tanks, the tank design and the tank approvals are from the state of New Jersey. They're double-walled fiberglass tanks. Where they're located on the property really is not germane to.
I'm just asking, isn't it possible to secure or make it more secure for the residents of Foxborough and the actual traffic on Foxborough Drive by moving them to a different location on the site? If you're having storage tanks of gasoline, there's going to be commercial vehicles that are providing the necessary supplies, correct?
Yes.
And those vehicles are going to go in and they're going to be closer to Foxborough Drive where the residential traffic is heavier, correct? You're still going to have to supply the gas in some fashion, correct?
There's tankers that will come to
Tankers
the site
that will come.
and will fill the underground tanks.
Right, and those tankers are going to be closer to Foxborough Drive, which includes the residential traffic as well as school buses. Why can't it be relocated to the opposite side, which would give more distance between the residential?
Well, first, Mr. Pucci, if you could indicate where the fuel vehicle stages when it is discharging. If you could indicate that on the plans.
I will indicate where the tanks are. I will not tell you where the truck will park, because that's up to the individual truck driver. But the tanks are located right here.
Okay.
Because you don't live there.
All right. Please, quiet.
As I tried to state, the tanks are located at the north end of the canopy beneath the ground, right here. It shows on the plan that you have in front of you, as well as up on the wall, as well as right here.
Again, vehicles have to cross the parking lot and go deliver their load of gasoline in that area, correct?
That is
And
correct.
And that's closer to the actual traffic that goes in and out of the development, because Foxborough Drive is immediately adjacent to that particular area.
I understand the point that you're making, that we do not perceive that there is a safety hazard that is created by the fuel tanks being installed below ground in front of the convenience store at the intersection of Foxborough and Route 18.
Now, if I can direct your attention to the exit on Foxborough Drive, I can't see it at this point,
Yeah.
but does that display how wide a area or a piece of pavement that is?
What is the dimension of the
The dimension
driveway?
of
Sure.
that particular portion of the roadway?
Of the
Or
roadway
of
or the driveway?
Not the roadway, the driveway.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Mr. Pucci.
There is an entrance driveway that is 18 feet wide and an exit driveway that has a 12-foot wide and a 13-foot wide lane.
Now, does that, maybe this is a question for the traffic expert, but that would seem to be large enough to allow a commercial vehicle to enter or exit by that particular location.
That will be addressed by the traffic engineer.
Understood. Now, with directing your attention to the landscaped area, that leads up all the way to the edge of the property and where the Foxborough property would start? The green landscaping in the back of the plan.
Yes, there is a green landscaping in the back of the
But
plan.
I mean, does that go all the way to the end of your property?
That is correct.
And that would front or go all the way up to the beginning of the Foxborough Village property? Or whatever's behind it, correct?
It goes to the edge of the property line.
Yes.
And then does the plan depict the actual elevation of that area?
Yes, it does.
And does that elevation ensure that the water is going to run off toward the existing detention basin?
Yes, it does.
And you understand that the roads that exist in Foxborough Village, the units that are on those roads have had severe water problems, and some pumps operate sometimes 24 hours at a time. So is this plan going to ensure that there's no additional water that runs off into the Foxborough Village development?
This plan is designed in full compliance with all applicable regulations and directs all stormwater from the proposed development into the on-site detention basin at the southerly end of the property.
And there's you've got a retaining wall behind the building, correct?
That is correct.
So unless water can climb up a retaining wall, no water's flowing from this site towards the residential community.
That is correct. The existing topography in that area generally flows to the technically southeast. I call it south just because I call Route 18 northbound.
Now, is that exit onto Foxborough Drive absolutely necessary for the implementation of this plan?
Questions that have absolutes in them can't be answered.
Well, can it be relocated?
All right, quiet.
Nothing's
Okay,
absolutely
let him
required. Matter
ask
of
the
fact,
question.
I'll rephrase the question.
I want to answer that one.
Okay, excuse me.
Sir, you
We
can't.
have to take legal records for this meeting, and we can't do it if the audience is going to shout things out. Okay, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Let him ask his questions, and then it will be open to anyone else who wants to speak.
I would rephrase it, can it be relocated so that it's not on Foxborough Drive?
Not and have the same quality of circulation that is shown on this plan.
With that in mind, Madam Chairwoman, I have no further questions, but as you can see, people would have comments. But again, I'll defer to the board. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who's next? Yes, please give your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Serzan, S-E-R-Z-A-N. I live at 34 Victorian Drive here in Old Bridge since 1984. I have one quick question, and then I want to speak. Will this proposed gas station and stores be hooked up to the city water and sewer, or will there be a septic system?
Mr. Pucci?
And water are provided.
I'm sorry, sir?
Public sewer and water are provided.
Thank you. Okay, now, it is public knowledge that Foxborough Village has paid over $77 million in property taxes over the last 30 years to the Township of Old Bridge.
Excuse me, you really need to ask questions based on the testimony, okay?
Okay, then we deserve not to have this gas station in our backyard. My question to you is, you say there won't be significant increase in light pollution. What about, how are you going to stop air and noise pollution? How are you going to stop the noise pollution due to vehicles starting and stopping and locking their cars with alarms going beep, 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 and cars and trucks idling that can have adverse effects on local residents, especially the Foxborough babies and children that can't even get a good quality of sleep? How are you going to stop this air and noise pollution? That's another question.
Okay,
Now-
let him answer. If that's a
Now-
question, let him answer it.
I would like to finish, and then we can answer. There will be fumes from the cars and the trucks and the tankers refilling up the gas station. Now, if you look up the IARC, that stands for the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and also the American Cancer Society states that gasoline diesel fumes can and does cause cancer in humans with lung, bladder, kidney, brain, nerves, muscular disorders. Now, how are you going to stop this adverse effect on the local residents? We deserve to open our windows and our homes and breathe in fresh air. How are you going to do that? Now, this proposed buffer is really no buffer of bushes. The scientific data, and I'm going to state this from the Science Daily News, stated October 7th, 2014, source Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, states that drops of fuel spilled at gas stations, which occur frequently during fill-ups, could build up, causing long-term environmental damage to the soil and the groundwater, especially in residential areas in close proximity to gas stations.
Lauren.
Now, how are you going to stop this runoff water? I'm asking this question because the Science Daily source, Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, states even small spills at gas stations can cause significant public health risks over time. This runoff is going to go into our groundwater. Doesn't this matter to anyone? How are you going to stop that runoff from the spills at the gas station into the groundwater? Thank you very much.
Okay, I would just like to rephrase that. You're going to have ample opportunity to talk. Right now, you should be asking questions or commenting on the testimony of the engineer. At the end, you can make all, the speeches, but right now, you want information and clarification, okay?
It wasn't a speech, it was questions.
It's pretty difficult to cover all what we want to, unless we want to be here till 3 in the morning.
Okay, and you give your name and address,
Name is
please.
Steve Backman, B-A-C-K-M-A-N. I live at 17 Stone Ridge Road, and I am an original owner in Foxborough, meaning that I've been there since 1987. Okay, first of all, on the presentation in, was it April? You had mentioned that you were going to be putting in, I forget whether it was a 6 or an 8-foot fence. You seem to have eliminated that. Is that correct?
I don't recall.
All right.
I'll remind you, you did say it, okay? So my question is, where is it?
Thank you for reminding us. We went through our notes. I did not recall that we had agreed to a fence. There is
I think we're
never-
going to disagree on a lot of things. That's number one.
I thought we
okay?
agreed to a fence
no
around
problem with
the
adding a fence.
relocated dumpster.
Okay. The other thing is that, which just, actually not in my notes, but since it came to be, the dumpster area seems to be closer to the residential area than it was before. Why can't the dumpster collection be on the south side of the property, out of the way of everybody? First of all, it helps your traffic flow. You don't need a garbage truck weaving their way through parked cars and getting in the way of people at your convenience store, and you've got plenty of space over there for that. And it's further away from the residential portion. You said to ask questions. I'm not getting answers.
Yeah, no, that's a good
okay,
question.
it's like silence
Yeah.
is golden here, and you
Okay.
wonder why you're getting all this
All right,
from the audience.
let them, give them a second to answer, okay? Yes.
Where is it that you would like?
He's
to
talking about on the side, I guess, by the, right?
To the right side, where your new egress is.
Right.
Okay, just there. Why can't that be placed there?
We can explore it. I mean, we thought that putting them in the walls and off the building was consistent with the directions that had been given.
Well, that's true, but it's also considerably closer to houses when garbage trucks come at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning to pick up garbage.
We'll revisit the location of the dumpsters.
Thank
We'll
you.
see if we can come up with an answer.
Okay, the next thing is you talked about water runoff. Well, water runoff is easy and to control. What are you doing about the water table? As mentioned previously, everybody on Stone Ridge Road has had serious issues with groundwater. Okay, the builder never completed it to satisfaction. There are, in every house on Stone Ridge Road, there is sump pump, at least one sump pump. In my house, there are 2. They are cycling every 10 minutes. I would invite any one of you to come to my house. I'll make the coffee so you could see. Okay? That property has been cleared numerous times over the years that I've lived there. Every time it gets cleared, the water table rises. And my sump pumps run like racehorses. Okay? Now that it's been cleared and vegetation has grown back in, it's simmering down again. What are you doing about that?
Mr. Pucci, is there a connection between vegetation on the surface of the property?
It's not on the surface. They're deep-rooted things that do absorb water.
Is there a relationship between that and the water table?
No, the water table functions independent of the surface. The water table goes up and down annually. It is a water table, a seasonal high water table that comes from below, not from the top.
Okay, let's use a different terminology, groundwater, okay?
To say groundwater, I think so groundwater is water that's in the ground, that's coming up from below us. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. So we have an obligation to build all of the structures in a manner that is outside of the highest level of the water table. Is that the way this plan has been designed?
That is correct.
So we're not in the water table.
That is correct.
And as far as the water that's on the surface of this property, you're collecting all of that in a system that you've indicated is designed to comply with rate of discharge, volume of discharge, and quality of water discharge as required by both the DEP and the township engineer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, a follow-up comment, not a question. I'm in the construction business for 30 years. I deal with many, many homes that have just the same problem as we have. Every time there's a construction project, it changes the flow of the water, okay? This needs to be considered. It's been a problem since Foxborough was built. How they got the houses, how they were approved to put the houses so far into the ground is beyond me. I put an addition on my house, and the addition of the house could not include a full basement because of the water. So if you're not thinking about this, this needs to be in your notes as number one. Now let's deal with the 24-hour noise and lights. I know that the lighting issue has been addressed. I didn't hear anything about signage. I'm sure it will meet code. Everybody's talking about meeting code, but let's talk about how it affects the surrounding neighborhood. We had an issue with Walmart, which is very close. I'm sure you all know where Walmart is relative to this. And they put the directional lights on, and you still get reflective light. You're so close to residences. I don't care if you make those lampposts 5 feet tall. You put enough of them in, LED lights. Nobody mentioned how many lumens each one of those lights are. But I'm sure there's several thousand lumens, which equates to the old wattage system, or candle power, rather, that the other gentleman was bringing up earlier. You're still going to get plenty of reflective light. This is something you guys need to consider. Does this area need something 24 hours? Nobody is complaining about the retail stores. Nobody would complain if you put a restaurant in there. But when you have a 24-hour facility like a gas station that is having trucks running all night, everybody stumbled on their words when Mr. Miller brought up the point of where the trucks are going to fuel the tanks. Let me tell you where they're going to fuel them. You don't need to ask anybody this. The inlet on a gas tank is at the top of the tank. Wherever those tanks are, that is where the trucks are parking. Do you think those trucks are going to drive back around to Route 18? Not in your life, okay? They will be out on the Foxborough Drive. Again, when you're over at my house, open invitation, you will see all the kids and all the school buses that stop on that corner. Not only that, there is no way for a truck of any size, whether it be a trailer or a box truck, to be able to turn out of there. It just physically can't be done. I have a 12-foot box truck for my job. I cannot make a U-turn on Foxborough Drive. There isn't a delivery truck in the world that is 12 feet. They're all bigger. The straight trucks are at least 16 or 18 feet, and then most of the delivery vehicles will be tractor trailers that are going in there. And there isn't a straight gas truck that's going to be delivering in there. They're all 8,000-gallon trucks that deliver, and you should see what happens on Route 9 further up in Old Bridge, what happens when there are deliveries. They are parked on the shoulder of the road. So in the plan, this really should not be acceptable to any person with any common sense to have any kind of exit or entrance on Foxborough Drive. It's only leading toward a problem. Okay, excuse me, I'm just going through my notes. I don't want to be repetitious. I know it's bad enough as it is, but okay, we address that, Okay, somebody spoke about at the last meeting traffic signs. Okay, I brought up the point of the police department not having the time to enforce the direction of traffic. Somebody brought up that there's going to be a traffic sign at Foxborough Drive that they can't make a right into the development, they can only make a left, which we just pointed out is physically impossible to do. I use as an example, when you come out onto Marlborough Road from Walmart, there is a sign that says no left turn. Okay, when I brought it up last time, lo and behold, there was a cop there the next morning. Okay, he wrote out a few tickets, and now everybody is going back and making the left turn. Now, I'm not blaming the police. This is a low priority thing, but it is a problem for the residences. And if I remember correctly, that sign was added into the developer of Walmart as a concession to the people on that road because they were worried about the traffic making a left turn. Everybody is making a left turn there. If the Old Bridge Police Department wants to fill their quota in one day, they could do it. Okay, I can't emphasize enough, if you folks don't live in the area and you're not familiar with Foxborough Drive, if you're not coming for coffee, at least park there one day. Just park your car there at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning and see how many kids and how many school buses are there, and how many people come in off Route 18 at a highway speed, and they have all that time to slow down till they get to Stone Ridge Road, and they go blowing through the stop sign. Now, that's on the regular traffic now. Can you just imagine, I'm sure you can't because I can't, how many more people are going to be doing that because they go blowing by at 65 miles an hour, the egress that these gentlemen have, the new egress, and they go blowing by that and they turn onto Foxborough Drive to try to get into that area for gas or for the stores. It's just not a feasible thing to have. As far as the truckers, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse about Foxborough Drive, but there's a never-ending amount of reasons to close that exit and entrance or ingress and egress from Foxborough Drive. We already, right now, and for the past 30-plus years that I've lived there, have truckers that are lost. Any size truck. It could be a school bus. They turn in, and they cannot, because it's so narrow, they cannot make a U-turn to get back out onto 18. So what happens? We bear the cost of them running over the curbs and the landscaping because they can't make the turn. Okay, we have put, we have put concrete where it most heavily gets damaged. And yet the truckers are still driving over that, and now there are cracks in the concrete, and now the Belgian block is all broken up. In addition to that, you have these 40, 50-foot tractors that are trying to back up while there are kids trying to get onto school buses. Come on. I mean, how can this even be considered? Again, we go back to everybody wants to see the ratables, but you know, the gas station's got to go. I'm almost done, please. I don't see anybody taking notes, though. That's
yeah.
Okay. Here's something else for you to consider. You're looking for the ratables, okay? What are you going to do when this gas station goes in, and then 20 homes on Foxborough Drive, I'm sorry, on Stone Ridge Road, goes down to see the tax assessor for a reduction in their property taxes? Did you end up in the same place? In addition to that, you may or may not be responsible for accidents to kids that are getting on a bus. So in summary, I think.
That's all right, you don't have to summarize.
No, I have a summary for you. No.
Well, because we're really supposed to be asking questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Okay, I'm getting to that. There was...
Quiet.
Okay.
We can't take a record of this.
There are plenty of good areas which we, as community taxpayers, have no problem with to put another gas station. This is not the place. Not so close to residences. Put it where you have more area. Did you get a fight about Walmart? Maybe a little squibble here and there. You know what? Walmart didn't turn out so bad, except that everybody should know here that they have landscapers that mow their lawn at 2:30 in the morning. And check with the police how many times people have called for that. This is what you guys are approving, this kind of thing. And when you have 24-hour operation, it goes from bad to worse.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, my final thing. You all have families. I can guarantee you not one of you, if you lived in Foxborough Village, would approve this. Don't let the greed of the rateable overshadow your thinking of a smart decision. You have to remember, the first accident, which is bound to happen, okay? There are people here that own gas stations. Every gas station has an accident. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Don't let the first accident be on your conscience that you have to live with.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I just want to, if for anyone else who's coming up, it's really primarily just to ask questions. There's going to be ample time at the end to make statements, and try not to be repetitive, because this gentleman asked a lot of questions and I think got some answers, right? No?
Silence is
Okay.
the word. Is the answer.
Pardon me, can we hear this gentleman now? Yes, your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Bob Bykowski. I live at 4 Ponderosa Lane in Foxborough, and actually years ago I served on your commuter committee when you were Mayor Cannon. But anyway,
I didn't get the
I
address.
think
I'm
for
very sorry.
what hasn't been, I'm sorry,
I didn't hear the address, please.
4 Ponderosa Lane.
Thank you.
One of the things which I think, and I know this will be a little bit repetitive, hasn't been addressed is the issue of noise and light pollution. It's really a quality of life issue. One of the things that I think is important here is I don't think that this proposal at all increases the quality of life in the immediate area. We have more than enough convenience stores. We have more than enough gas stations. You can't go 50 feet without bumping into a Wawa, a Dunkin' Donuts, or a 7-Eleven. We don't need it. We don't want it. It's not for us. Okay? And that's the bottom line. It's really a matter of money versus. Well, one of the reasons I moved into Foxborough was because it's a nice, peaceful area. It's really quiet. It's really an area that's an oasis in a sea of madness. Basically, it's quiet at night. It's just a wonderful place to live. And I think that this is just. It's not good, and it's not for us, and it has no benefit for the immediate community. And that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Judith Matola. I live at 27 Mariposa Place. I like to know whose bright idea it was to think that a gas station should be built in front of a residential development. Come on, like they said, any of you living in that development would not. So whose bright idea to think that people living in single-family homes want a gas station right in front of their homes?
It's money.
And that's it. I mean, is this a done deal? You already decided? Because I know every time we've come here, you built Avalon Bay. When is enough enough? You built Avalon Bay. You cleaned out behind the imaging place. You're building a Dunkin' Donuts for 3 years. That's been nothing. When is enough for us that it stops with us? There has to be somewhere else. Like they said, no gas station. You had to put a store, maybe we deal with it. Like we said, we deal with Walmart. And like the other gentleman said, everybody makes that U-turn. There's a sign that says no left turn coming out of Walmart. You want money? Every day. I can't tell you how many times. You know Route 18 is a magnet for traffic accidents. People are flying down. It's the first light. Come on. You've got to help us here. This cannot be approved with a gas station. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Can I add one?